It's time to take a ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive with our co-hosts, Alan Saunders and Zachary Smith.
Welcome into another Steelers Afternoon Drive. I'm Zachary Smith. That is Alan Saunders. Alan, how we doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Well, actually, I'm in traffic, so been better as of 15 minutes ago, but good enough.
All right. Well, I'll take that. Alan, as I mentioned yesterday, while we were recording, for whatever reason, we always get news right at the time that we're trying to record or shortly after. We finished up. I get the episode posted. I'm eating dinner last night. And then immediately Adam Schefter throws out a tweet about Russell Wilson signing with the New York Giants. And I know that you talked about Russell Wilson in some capacity, just big picture stuff in terms of how the Steelers handled the quarterback situation this offseason. But first off, I haven't given my thoughts about Russell Wilson signing with the Giants, what that could mean. And also just obviously another domino falling in the quarterback market in general. But yeah, I always appreciate the fact that we get news right before and right after, but rarely during the episodes. My thought, and then we can get yours, obviously. This is just another domino to fall. Like I said, Aaron Rodgers was kind of in play for the Giants. We knew that they've made some offer. There's been some level of communication there. I was curious, would we get a visit from Aaron Rodgers similar to the one that happened at Pittsburgh? But we don't. Russell Wilson now signs, and it kind of leaves Pittsburgh retirement or Aaron Rodgers continuing to play the waiting game, hoping somebody else gets hurt as his options.
Yeah, I think that's pretty well put. Those are the three. We'll see what he decides. I don't really think it. It's funny. I was in the middle of cooking dinner last night. I was making some fried chicken, and you get the big. I got the batter all over my hands and everything as the phone is going off. So shout out to Aaron Becker who jumped in and saved the day and got that story written, because I was like, I can't do this right now. I'm not prepared to deal with breaking news at the moment. But yeah, I mean, I think we all thought this was happening. It was just a question of whether the Giants were going to continue to wait for Aaron Rodgers, or if they are going to we're going to give up on him and just make their signing.
I guess I saw a lot of people talking about, does this change the timeline at all from Aaron Rodgers' perspective? If he really wasn't considering the Giants, the answer to that would be no. But what's your opinion on that?
I don't think it really changes a whole lot. I mean, Steelers will still need their decision to be made at some point. I don't think it changes much for Rodgers. I don't know. He has less leverage now. There's literally nowhere else he can go and be the starting quarterback. I don't think the Giants were real leverage anyway, but there's none now. It's just, do you want to play for the Steelers or do you not want to play at this moment? But those are the two choices, really.
We've talked about, from Aaron's perspective, how detail-oriented he is and how he kind of needs the full offseason because of his specific cadence and the hand gestures and everything that he kind of brings and would need the time to develop with his receivers and stuff like that. But from a Steelers perspective, do you think that they will have a deadline, or should they have a deadline, in your opinion, if not?
I think the deadline has to be the draft. I don't see how they can go into the draft not knowing if they have Aaron Rodgers or not. I mean, remember when we talked to Omar at the beginning of free agency, by the way, when he was talking about wanting to have the quarterback in place. But as we spent most of an entire episode talking about yesterday, the identity of the quarterback does change in some ways, the kind of guy that you might want to acquire. And also, if they don't have Aaron Rodgers, quarterback suddenly moves a lot farther up their board. I don't know how you make that happen. And so it's difficult, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of where I want to go is the draft now. Obviously, you're on the road because of Ohio State's Pro Day in Columbus, Ohio. And we can talk about, obviously, that there's been a lot of chatter with several players that are obviously coming out of Ohio State in terms of being fits for the Steelers. But the one that I want to talk about first and foremost, because we're talking about the quarterbacks, is Will Howard, who I've gotten a lot of texts today regarding Will Howard from people that were there, somebody that also covers the Steelers and was there, somebody that's within the organization, and somebody actually that covers Ohio State, all saying that they feel like the Steelers love Will Howard and he had a fantastic day. What was your evaluation of the show that literally was in the text to me about that Will Howard put on?
I mean, I didn't see anything that I haven't seen before. Like,
Okay.
if you go look at the tape, the thing about Will Howard when you're evaluating him as a prospect is the last few games, the college football playoff, very good. I mean,
Yeah.
very, very good.
I would
problem
say
is-
as good of a sample size, like 4-game sample size, as any quarterback had last season.
Yeah.
Coming out.
Yeah, the problem is the earlier stuff, right? The early season struggles. And look, it was a new place to him, transferred there from Kansas State. You know, like, that's difficult, but I don't know what to make of, like, what the Steelers would be getting in Will Howard just based on his 2024 performance. And I guess him going out there and looking good provides some level of confidence that you're going to get that in the future. I thought it looked better than he did at the combine. I still think he's a prospect with a lot of uncertainty at a position where you don't want that, and also is not certainly is athletic enough, certainly has a strong enough arm, but is not some kind of like freak who's just out there wowing with his speed, his athleticism, his arm strength. Like, he's a guy who gets it done, but he's not this crazy athlete either. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think he did well for himself today, and he looked really good out there. I'm just not sure how much that's going to, like, I'm not expecting some big bump from a good pro day because I think it's all kind of already baked in. We have already known that he can look really good in spurts.
Yeah. I think what's interesting, like when we talk about prospects, the top guys are just, I don't want to say they're not, it doesn't matter the scheme, but like they're ranked that highly for a reason, and teams that feel like you can drop them in. There's certain guys that you feel like, okay, if they go to this scheme or if they're here, like we talked about with Jackson Dart, right? Like if he goes to the Rams, might be a really good spot. One of those places, like a McVay system or something like that. So I want to ask you specifically about the fit you feel like for Will Howard within an Arthur Smith offense, if that were to come to fruition.
I think it's pretty good. I think he's a very Ryan Tannehill kind of quarterback. Like, he's big, he's pretty mobile. He's got a good arm. He throws a good deep ball. I kind of see it.
Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of in the same page, and I think that they really like him. Like, if I'm trying to line up where they could potentially take a shot on a quarterback and where I feel like a player is going to go, he's one that kind of lines up in one of those spots for me. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see as we get closer how much smoke that continues to be there with Will Howard. But, moving along, one of the guys he's throwing to, Emeka Egbuka, guys we've talked about a lot more in terms of Steelers fits. It's obviously most of that conversation taking place before DK Metcalf was brought in, but I don't think that we should completely roll out the idea still of Emeka Egbuka. What did you make of what you saw from him today, and should he still be on our radar?
Yeah, I thought he was really good out there. Outran that Will Howard deep ball. If you go look at the one on my Twitter feed, he catches one at the goal line. He has to slow down for a little bit. I thought he looked really good. He's so personable. He's so good in settings like this. And so somebody's going to fall in love with him. I think he'll go higher than his consensus. It would not surprise me to see him taken 15. That's not crazy to be in that range. Nothing specifically, at that pick, but like somewhere in there. I'm not sure about him with the Steelers. I just think with Metcalf on board now, unless they're definitely going to trade George Pickens, which is getting awfully close to the draft for them to suddenly be making that decision, wide receiver in the first round would surprise me at this point, I think. Although he very well could be BPA.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And met with the Steelers decision makers on Tuesday for Tony Pauline. He put that out there. I'm assuming is that another one of those things where like it's a group of guys like at a dinner, or was that specifically a one-on-one, or like how was that?
So they took a bunch of guys out to dinner. I don't think he was in that group, but oftentimes they'll meet with other teams earlier in the day or later in the day, kind of one-off, whatever here and there. So yeah.
Gotcha. Okay. Also the running backs, sticking on the offensive side, obviously both to talk about TreyVeyon Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. What do we make of what we saw from those guys? I saw a picture of Judkins standing directly next to Mike Tomlin, which is another one of those things. Like, if that comes to fruition, we know that picture is going to resurface. But what do we make of those two guys?
Yeah, they spent about 5 minutes talking to one another during some other positions drills. I can't remember which now. Might have been the defensive lineman. No, actually, I think it was during the broad jump, which Judkins was not doing. They spent a lot of time talking to each other. Judkins didn't do very much. I'm not sure he did anything, to be honest. He already had worked out a lot at the combine, so but got a lot of conversations in with Mike Tomlin. TreyVeyon Henderson did work out, did do position drills. Mike Tomlin was pretty closely watching those. He's always trying to get a little bit of everything, but you can kind of generally get a sense of what he's really there to look for. And I thought he paid very close attention to the running backs. And so Henderson and Judkins are both definitely potential fits for the Steelers. I think the problem lies that I think they'll both go between their first pick and their second pick, which is in the third round. They'd probably have to make some kind of trade to get in the position to draft one of those guys.
Going back to the same thing that I asked you about Will Howard in terms of, yes, we know they're obviously good players, but specifically their fits with the Steelers. What do we make of those?
I love Judkins, man. I've loved him for a while since he was at Ole Miss as a freshman. I think he's a really good, short yardage back, which I don't think the Steelers have. I think he's still fast enough to run wide zone. I think he can be a guy that can carry a workload, which I'm not sure they really have. I think Jalen Warren, I argued for it on yesterday's Morning Rush, can certainly be running back one. And he can certainly be the big half of the carries, the big share. But I think if you're talking about the idea of, a workhorse back, a guy who's going to get, 200-300 touches, I think Judkins' body shape and style just looks like it would be better holding up to that. And Henderson is more of what they have. He's very similar to Warren, very similar to Kenneth Gainwell in terms of size, speed, all that. And do they want another one, or do they want to go a different direction? I think that's a philosophical question, but certainly, very good players. Both, I think, will be successful NFL players.
Even with Henderson, even down to the fact he's very good in pass pro, kind of fits what they have on the roster right now. I hate to do this, and I hate to go in reverse, and I know you're in traffic, so we really can't, but we got to throw the afternoon drive in reverse for a second, because I remember seeing something, I think it was an article already that was put up on the site about Will Howard talking about potentially being drafted by the Steelers instead about it being a great place. We talked about what he did on the field, but just in terms of the availability, him talking afterwards, what did you make of that?
Yeah, I've talked to him before, talked to him at the Combine. Think he's a pretty well-spoken guy. From the Ohio State people I've talked to, they have given serious credit to his leadership, and I think you can kind of tell, right? Spent a lot of time talking about his teammates, talking about how special the season they had at Ohio State was, what it meant to him to walk into that facility and see banners of their championship already hung, and that was, he was getting emotional. It was cool. I think he's a guy that you feel like you can build around him as a person and not just as a player. And that's a big box to check for a quarterback.
So the Steelers have met with those four that we've talked about on the offensive side. Of course, is there any, before we switch gears to the defensive side and talk about any potential names there, was there anybody else to keep our eyes on the Ohio State offense that could potentially be in play?
A couple offensive linemen, I think could potentially be in play, but I didn't talk to any of them, and I didn't see any specific sort of interesting tidbits that I have to share for you about I ain't watching the linemen run the 40 yet. It's not on my list of things to do. I do love this part of my job, but that's probably not one of the highlights.
Well, speaking of linemen running 40s, defensive lineman Tyleek Williams running and goes down, and man, it looked really bad. Like, I saw the clip that got posted of it happening, and I was like, oh, I mean, that's just gut wrenching for that kid who's out there, competing on that day and on something where a lot of people don't even do drills and stuff like that, for him to actually want to compete and do that and then go down in that way. He was back out on the field afterwards and stuff like that, but obviously didn't continue to participate. But that's another name that I've kind of like that has been circled for Steelers fans to keep an eye on in terms of him. Obviously talk about the defensive line a ton. I guess not much to make of what he did today necessarily, but just in general, the idea of Tyleik Williams as a Steeler, what do we make of it?
Yeah, I mean, I think he didn't run at the combine, if I remember right. So that's a big injury for him. And he came back out and he just had a little wrap around your pick, quad hamstring. I don't know which side it was on, but whatever, around that part of his leg. It didn't seem like it was anything, that we would be talking about as impacting his availability for the season or anything like that. But this was his one sort of chance to go put some good testing numbers up, and wasn't able to do it. That's going to be a tough pill to swallow. I'm not sure how that's going to go. He's a guy who was on the borderline of the first round, as it was, and I think with a really good day, he had a chance to get into the first round. And I'm not sure about that now. It seems a little questionable.
Yeah, I was sitting here wondering. I don't know that he'd fall. I never say never in the draft. I don't necessarily want this to happen for him. But again, I started thinking, like, could this be a slider? Another one of those cases where, for whatever reason, because of whatever, he ends up sliding all the way to like the Steelers' third pick or something like that, and they stop a slide there. But I don't think it's going to be that drastic necessarily because of this. But we'll see. Again, never say never.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have, like, he's a second round pick for me right now.
Yeah,
and obviously the Steelers don't have one. So
right.
How does that work? I don't know. But, like, he's a good fit for the Steelers. He's a good run defender. Like, all those things that you were asking me about those other guys, like, he checks every box for what they want out of that position. I could see that being a situation where, like, Steelers make their first round pick. We're all just sitting on our thumbs. We're all thinking, okay, it's, us in the media room. We go and get some lunch, and then all of a sudden, like, Tyleik Williams is falling 45, 50. Oh, here goes the Steelers going to move up and get him. Like, I can absolutely envision that happening.
Yeah, I agree with it being a fantastic fit there. I'm curious about the rest of the guys on the Ohio State defense. If there's another one that you feel like could be a fit at all from what you saw from them, any interest potentially that you feel like the Steelers might have, what do we make of that side of the ball besides Tyleik Williams?
Yeah, so I was obviously like looking to see if he was going to come back out and do any of the defensive line drills, which he did not. But I was watching the defensive line drills and got a good look at Ty Hamilton, who's a late round guy, maybe a nose tackle type. I thought he looked really good today. I've watched a lot of Ohio State, live this year, and I can't say that like he like blew up off the page for me in those games that I watched, but I thought he looked really good in this setting, especially for like a nose tackle where, like, no one's double teaming them, right? It's all just on air. Like, it's sometimes hard for them to show off the things that make them special. And I thought he did a really nice job. So, I'm really curious to see where he goes, if the Steelers will have interest. I think it obviously depends on what they do earlier. If they're able to get a guy like a Kenneth Grant in the first round, they probably don't have a lot of use for a guy like Ty Hamilton. But if the first round pick or the early round portion of that D tackle draft ends up being a guy who's more of a pass rusher, like more of an upfield guy, like a Derek Harmon, for example, then I think that starts to look really attractive.
So Hamilton, in your mind, kind of slides in perfectly as one of those cases we talked about yesterday where it's like the second half of a double dip for the Steelers.
100%. 100%.
Yeah. Also, this is just real quick because I'm scrolling the YouTube comments as we were going through here. JP asked, did you guys eat out there at all? I'm assuming. Or how did that work from a food perspective?
Suck it, DB.
Oh, wow.
Suck it, DB.
Yeah, he's not going to like that. JP said he is hoping you'd see this before. He said you should get a pizza from Adriatico's on campus. It's the best pizza around in his mind.
Okay. I'll have to remember that for
Deep
next
dish.
time. I don't.
Deep
I
dish.
gotta say, I don't associate Columbus, Ohio,
Yeah, I wouldn't.
pizza. That's
Right.
not where one of my usual go-tos is hot chicken takeover, which is very good
Okay.
in Columbus. That's one of my usual go-tos. But Canes is like 80 feet from the Woody Hayes Center there, and we wanted to get on the road, so that was the move.
Very fair, and I can't wait to send DB the screenshot of you holding that cup up right in front of the camera. All right, so the defensive linemen in play, obviously, for the Steelers. Anybody else on the defensive side of the football for Ohio State that comes to mind?
Yeah, I mean, so Mike Tomlin, I'm looking at edge rushers. It's Mike Tomlin. That's what he does. I don't know that they're going to draft one, but he was looking. I think Latham Ransom, the safety, we should probably start to pay attention to how much they're paying attention to safety. Was reported today that in addition to the people that we already know they met with at Texas, that Andrew Makumba was in that group.
Yeah.
And so Latham Ransom, I mean, seems like a fit then, right? I mean, that's if they're after safety, like that's another guy that we should have on our radar.
They're certainly telling us that safety should be on the radar. Like last year, off-ball linebacker wasn't necessarily on my mind, but they started meeting with a bunch of off-ball linebackers, and they selected Peyton Wilson. So
yeah,
I think safety would kind of fall into that same bucket the way we're looking at it here. I was going to ask you about defensive backs. Denzel Burke, corner. I didn't know maybe as a mid-round pick, depending on where he's going to go, or anybody else within that.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of Burke. I think he's probably just a slot.
Which would have seemed like a crazy statement like 2 years ago, I feel like.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, that's the thing about Ohio State is like literally it's a team full of 5-stars. So everybody there has some pedigree. I just think the results have not been good enough to warrant giving him a real shot outside. But the Steelers do kind of have a future need in the slot. I mean, I don't know. Beanie's there. Do they want to draft over him? Do they want to give him a chance? I'm not sure we know the answer to that yet. We're going to find out. They have not shown the same level of obvious interest in slot corner as you would as safety, where they have a lot less clear path to playing time right now. So that tells me like I don't think that's going to happen. Probably.
This is an interesting question that somebody had on YouTube again as I'm just kind of scrolling through comments here. Talked a lot about Kenneth Grant, obviously, at Michigan, Derek Harmon, Oregon, Walter Nolan, Ole Miss among guys at defensive line, but taking the defensive line part out of that and just thinking about Steelers' first-round pick in general, they said, do you think better chance that they saw their first-round pick yesterday at Texas or we'll see them today at Ohio State?
Well, that's a good question. So the only guys that could be their first-round pick in those two places are Egbuka, Golden, and Barron, unless, like, they're going to trade down to 32 to take Tyleik Williams. Like, okay, maybe technically possible, but probably not. So I'll just say two on one side, one on the other, and the answer is Texas. But Egbuka?
Okay. The math there. Yeah.
I think Egbuka would be the one player from either of those schools that would be the most likely to be their first-round pick. But if you're giving me the odds of the two Texas players combined, I'll say Texas over Ohio State.
I know that, you said obviously there's definitely a world where Egbuka is just the best player available and they take him. That's an opinion, I assume, that of what they should do. But like realistically, do you think that the Steelers would do that even with George Pickens on the roster if they felt good about him at least being on the roster this year?
Yes. I think the Steelers have done a lot of work to put themselves in a position to not feel like they have to draft something they don't think is a good value for where they're drafting. I'm not predicting it to happen, but you can certainly envision a draft board that doesn't go their way, that doesn't include Kenneth Grant, that maybe doesn't include Derek Harmon, maybe it doesn't include Walter Nolan. Like those things are not crazy to think about. And if that happens, then what? And I think taking Egbuka and Jahdae Barron, but I think Egbuka even if wide receiver is a bit of a less obvious need, is just so good that I think you can almost always make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is there there's at least one other question I want to get to, but I wanted to ask you, just because obviously wrapping this up, was there anything else to take away in your mind from the Ohio State Pro Day as it pertains to the Steelers?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think we
Did it surprise you the amount of the top brass all being there? Like, I don't know what other pro days were today or anything like that, but obviously to me, this would be the one to be at. I just typically I would think that a majority of the top brass is there, but
yeah, Pitts was today too, and I don't know who scheduled that because that was poor planning. You got Ohio State today, Penn State Friday. Now, I don't know if whoever just doesn't own a map and didn't know that Pittsburgh is exactly halfway between Ohio State and Penn State, and that all of those people that were at that one and are going to this one would have gone to the one in the middle. I don't know. Now, Pitt doesn't have very much in this year's draft class, but, man, you could have really made it easy on everybody. Instead, we all had to pick between the two. Nate Breisinger for Pittsburgh Sports Now was at the Pitt Pro Day today. I think Boise State was today too.
Oh yeah, it was. Yep.
And I believe I saw that Eddie Faulkner was there. I don't know if you can confirm that.
Well, that would certainly make sense.
But not only would it make sense because Ashton Genty is clearly the reason to go to Boise State, but also his son was running at the Pitt Pro Day. His son went to Slippery Rock and was running at the Pitt Pro Day. So if he was in Boise State, that's a pretty noteworthy assistant visit there. But
yeah, he was. There's a picture of him talking to the Broncos running backs coach. He was at Boise State. Yeah.
There you go. To answer your question, I would not be surprised on the day of the Ohio State Pro Day if there's no one left on Water Street and the Steelers have simply emptied the entire building out to drive with buses of people to come to Columbus.
Yeah, I love it. I love the idea of them all taking a bagged lunch too, and just it's like a field trip for them going to Columbus for the day.
Now, I think Tomlin and them, they flew in. They were in Texas yesterday, obviously, but I do think some of the other staff did drive out today. So.
There we go. This isn't necessarily related, but Jacob has a question here. We've talked obviously a lot about them stockpiling picks in 2026 with the way that the Russell Wilson deal playing into that as well again. But he says here, could it be more so than moving up in this draft with some of the picks that they have this year? Next year, knowing that they're going to be replenished by comp picks. We talked a lot about them wanting to hold on to the more picks in 26, but could they move some that are in the stockpile right now, knowing that they're going to be replenished?
So the idea is basically trade next year's second round pick for an extra third this year. That's the idea here. Yeah, I think that's possible. It depends on the player. It's got to be the circumstance. But yeah, I think that's definitely possible. And that's usually the way those trades go, is you give up a round to move up a year. So if they want to get into the third round this year, they got to trade next year's second. And that's a pretty steep price. So it better be a player you really like there in the third round this year.
I really like this question, actually, so we got to get to that. And it is my man, Berg, sports fan here, that is asking it. Said, want to know what you guys think is the sweet spot of the draft, not just from a round perspective, but also the strength, meaning what position groups are the best that are coming out.
Well, number one overall is pretty good.
I agree.
I would pick number one overall as the sweet spot most years. I think Cam Ward's really good, so it's not bad this year either. Honestly, I really like the early day two, second round of this draft. Ironically, where the Steelers are not drafting, I think is where a lot of the best wide receivers and corners are going to go. I think it's where the most interesting running backs are going to go. I think it really has a lot of talent there. That early part of day two, second round, I think is really deep. The back half of the first round is actually not, outside of, strangely, wide receiver and D tackle. if you're in the back half of the first round and you need something other than wide receiver or D tackle, you're in rough shape. But the Steelers seem to be okay because what they have is plentiful. But for everybody else, it's a bit of a struggle.
Yeah.
And then I do like the depth of this class a little bit better. Like last year's class, remember we talked a lot about how like the day 3 was just a wasteland. I like more picks into day 3, especially in the 5th and 6th round this year. 7th is still a little weak compared to like an average year, but I think the 5th and 6th round this year are significantly better than they were last year.
And we've talked about, he asked also about like position groups that were very strong. Obviously talked about the defensive tackles and the running backs. Beyond those two, what do you feel like is like the third strongest position group?
Corner. I really like the corner class. I think you have talent up and down. There isn't like that one like sort of like can't miss Sauce Gardner kind of guy, which I think is like pushing the rest of the class up a little bit. But I do think it's a pretty good deep corner class with a lot of different kinds of I think that's the thing that I really like about this corner class. It's like, what do you want? A gigantic monster? I'll give you a Darian Porter. What do you want? Like a tiny little pile of hate? You got Upton Stout. You want like super smooth, fluid, shifty? Like, there's like 5 or 6 of those guys. Like, I just think it's whatever you want, you can find it at corner in this class. And I like the variety.
I haven't seen his name linked to the Steelers, but again, he might fit into that spot where he's in between picks there. But I love Trey Amos out of Ole Miss. So
yeah, I really like him. He was
one
a
of my
great
favorite
interview
players
at the Senior Bowl as well. I think he's a really good player.
Yeah, but unfortunately, I think he's going to fall in between those Steelers 2 picks. But again, never say never. You never know. Alan, anything else?
That's it.
I think we got it. We got it covered. Alan, until tomorrow on this podcast and wherever you are currently driving on, tell the people they can find you.
Saunders_PGH on X, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. PGH Steelers Now site account, SteelersNow.com. Go there, read the words so I can get paid. Sign up for SN Plus, and you get to read the words without ads. I get paid more indirectly, and none of us have to deal with the ad people, which is great. And everyone wins, so do that. We really appreciate it. And then subscribe and hit that bell for notifications here on the YouTube channel so that you don't miss an episode of Steelers Morning Rush. Steelers Afternoon Drive, there's a video of Will Howard.
There we go.
One video up here on the YouTube channel talking to us after the Ohio State Pro Day. Got lots of those things there on the YouTube channel if you're into that kind of stuff. And I was just talking today with the dear Jeff Hartman, who runs the Fans First Sports Network, where our podcast is distributed, about, some more offerings here on the YouTube channel. So they've got some new things coming. I don't know. We'll see how things go this offseason.
Man, you just love dropping those little teasers here and there. The people don't like it, but you love doing it. So I assume that's going to continue to happen.
That covers a lot of the things I do in this podcast.
Absolutely. While you're here on YouTube, drop a comment for us, how you feel about anything that we talked about today, question for a future episode, all that good stuff. If you're listening somewhere else, Apple, Spotify, wherever your podcast from, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe over there. Just search Steelers Afternoon Drive. Do the same thing on TikTok. I will have this up in a second, and for absolutely no reason at all, shout out to Ed Thompson. You can find me everywhere, Zachary Smith, PGH. Until next time, for Alan Saunders and myself, thanks for jumping in. Take another ride on the Steelers Afternoon Drive.